friends, and welcome back. Today I'm going to be talking about the concept of suffering, and I'm in a little bit of a larger room, so there is a little bit of a cavernous sound here. So I hope it won't be too distracting as I dig into this another difficult topic. The one on karma was a little bit challenging as well. Today I'm going to talk about suffering. So hang with me. It may not be everything that you want to hear about suffering, but I hope that you will leave with some valuable tips and tools that will help you further on your journey. So, the concept of suffering is a very, very big word, and it's something that, generally speaking, we tend to try to avoid as often as we can. And so, when I think of suffering, I'm referring to anything that happens in our lives that we prefer not to be happening. Things like divorce can create suffering. Things like losing a job can create suffering. Illness, and I've struggled with one for a very long time. Those kinds of things, if we're not careful, can create states of suffering for us. Even not getting along with a parent or loved one, or maybe even a child. Those kinds of things can create suffering for us. And so it's a very broad topic, and I tend to kind of like these topics. I will be the first to confess that I don't have every single answer on these difficult subjects, but I do feel like I have a good enough grasp to come and share what I've learned and share what I believe and give you some of the things that I've done in my own life to manage some of these topics. And one of these is suffering. And so that is what I mean by suffering. It's just a negative state. It's just being in a situation where you find yourself feeling emotionally drained or upset or angry or anything that just kind of rocks your boat and snatches your equanimity or your equilibrium. Anything that comes into your space that violates your happy place can be considered or can lead to a state of suffering. And here's what I'll say next about that. And this is the part that some people may not want to hang with me on, but I hope you will. I hope I'll be able to bring this back around and that it'll make sense to you. So, we come to this earthly realm from the heavenly bodies, and we're doing this thing called life. And things are happening to us. We are getting jobs, getting married, having children. We're just kind of doing our thing. And lots of stuff is happening to us. And so when I think in terms of suffering, and one of the things that I've done to mitigate my own suffering is I've started to examine my thought process about what it is that we're doing as a human being. And so if we hold the belief that we come here so that everything can be comfortable for us and everything is just going to always work out in our favor and always be good and always be great, if we're walking through life and kind of holding that thought process, we may find ourselves having more states of suffering than we prefer simply because our mindset is wrong. It is not fully embracing of the truth about what it means to be a human being. And so we have the power in each moment to choose how we feel about a certain situation. I think about Nelson Mandela, who was in prison for I think like 30 years, and counted all of that as joy. He said he refused to allow himself to get bitter about it, to be angry about it or to move to states of unforgiveness about it. And because he was able to do that, and this kind of goes into a little bit of law of attraction, I'll try to ferret that out if I can a little bit more. To the extent that we don't allow ourselves to kind of ruminate and get into those negative states, we keep our vibration up high. And as we keep our vibration up high, that's where all the good stuff is. That's where success is, and joy and peace and money and lottery tickets and all that kind of stuff. If we can keep our vibration on a higher plane, and he was able to do that. Now, some of us, I'm going to raise my hand. If I had to do a stint in jail for 30 years for something that I didn't do, it would be extremely difficult for me. I'm just going to go ahead and confess that. And so I think that it does take a lot of work with the spiritual process, a lot of understanding, a lot of self-examining, a lot of shedding to get to a place where you can actually get to a place of neutrality about these kinds of things as they are happening. And so I did do a video about karma, and I talked about that state of neutrality. You may want to go back and listen to that one. But it really does boil down to how we see the world, how we see life. Now, if you see life as existing strictly for your comfort, you can see where when a child doesn't act the way that you want them to act, or you don't get the kind of job that you want, or a marriage fails, you can see where that is going to create hordes of suffering for a human being. But on the other hand, if you see life as existing for your personal growth, that you come here to develop and to become more, and that the journey is long, and that you are going to experience things, and through those things you'll get to kind of flex your spiritual muscles a little bit. They will birth you into new potential. If you see it as the latter, you won't have states of suffering. You may have moments as a human being where you would have a preference for something different, but to plummet down into those states of suffering just won't be your natural MO, because you will have the ability to kind of step back and look at the broader picture about what it is that's in front of you. So, if you are a person that finds yourself repeatedly in a state of suffering, just repeatedly dealing with something that you don't want to deal with, and if you are a person who finds yourself repeatedly kind of plummeting down into the depths of despair, if you are lamenting a lot about the situation, if you are complaining a lot about the situation, now we're going to trickle over into the law of attraction, of which I am a student of. You may be a skeptic, and I get it, because I was a skeptic for years. But once I started diving into it, and once I started practicing the principles and seeing them show up in my life on a daily basis, I was immediately a believer. And so I hope you will open up your mind. If you're going to follow me, you're going to hear me talk about a law of attraction a lot. And I hope you will open up your mind to the concept. And little by little, I'll kind of give you tips and tools that you could start implementing so that you can kind of taste and see for yourself. So, based on that, we live in a world that is vibratory in nature. There is a whole design by God of this universe that we're doing. Science has proven that almost everything can be broken down into a mathematical equation. And so in addition to that, a lot of the universe is based on sound, and it's based on vibration. And so we are a part of that universe, and as such, we are always also based in sound and based in vibration. And so you want to keep your vibration high. And the terminology kind of gets a little weird, but basically when you think of it, just think of yourself as holding yourself in a state of love and peace and joy and everything that is light, versus holding yourself in a state of darkness and anger or negativity or condemnation or judgment. Those things are down here. The light, love, the pure thoughts, the elevated thoughts, those are up here. And so when you think of vibration, just think of it in terms of that. You don't want to be down here with this stuff. You want to be up here because that's where all the good stuff is. And so just to simplify it, I use the term vibration a lot, but if that's off-putting for you, then just think of it in terms of being a being of light or being a being of darkness. And so if you've been on this planet, you have some concept, whether you're a religious person or not, of good and bad, evil versus good, or angels and devils. I'm just trying to really simplify this so that you can kind of get what I'm talking about. If you're not familiar with the terms high vibration versus low vibration, you can think of it in terms of negativity and positivity. In other words, if God is a high vibration, if he's love, if he's pure thought, if he is joy, if he is peace, and all those things that we kind of learned in Sunday school, then you want to be up here with him, period, point blank. And so if we think of the opposite side of that, some religions refer to that as Satan or devil or whatever. Those things are kind of down here, and judgment, negative thinking, fear, anger. You don't want to be down here. And here's a quick little litmus test. Think about getting up in the morning and starting your day off on these elevated states versus starting your day off on these lower states: anger, complaining, judgment, backbiting, being untrustworthy, slander. Just think about how they feel, just when I'm saying them to you. But also think about how that would feel in your body. Which day would go better? The day where you got up in love and joy and peace and understanding and kindness, or the one where you got up complaining and fussing and cussing and judging and slandering people and fighting? You know, which day would go better? I mean, it really is that simple. So when I'm talking about law of attraction, that is what I'm speaking about. We are vibratory in nature. And as such, it behooves us to keep that vibration high, because all the good is at the high vibration. That is just where you want to be. So now, suffering. When you're in the midst of that darkness, when you're in the midst of that state that you really don't want to be in, it has a tendency to trigger all the negative thought processes, whether it's fear, whether it's anger, whether it's complaining, whether it's condemnation. As you are creating more of that hodgepodge, that mucky, murky, dark soup surrounding you, you are changing your entire vibration. And as such, when you walk out your door into the world with that lower energy, you are now on the same wavelength, and you position yourself to be able to attract all kinds of negative things to you. So when I was younger, we had this thing called Murphy's Law, or you would hear some of the older people say, when it rains it pours. That is their way of demonstrating this principle, whether they knew it or not, whether they knew about vibration. Many of them didn't. That is something that is just now kind of being revealed to us as we expand and grow as a species. What they were saying was Murphy's Law is such that when you have one thing bad happen, another bad thing is going to happen, and another bad thing is going to happen, simply because the energy that you're holding around that situation is negative. And because it's negative, it's going to attract more negative things to it. Period, point blank. And so as you hold certain mindsets and you allow suffering to be part of your experience, and we're not talking about not being a human being. I don't do that. You know, some people can get to that level where they can transcend all of this, and I hope to one day be there, but right now I'm not. And so you have to give yourself a a little bit of grace, a little bit of amnesty for being a human being. You may not do it perfectly every time. You may not get it right every single time. But as long as you're moving towards it, as long as you're showing some improvement, you're going to see that your life gets better and better and better and better. So, something happens and you don't want it, and it triggers a state of suffering. Let's say you're in a bad relationship. Let me try to give something more concrete. You're in a bad relationship, and so every day you get up, you're fussing with your partner, you're going out of work, you're slamming the door, you're at work, you're nasty with your clients, you're just kind of being a human being. All of that soup is kind of swirling around you, negativity, just day in and day out, day in and day out. Excuse me. If you don't break that cycle, you put yourself on the same wavelength of other things happening to you. So, whether you call it Murphy's Law, whether you call it negative states of attraction, whether you call it when it rains, it pours, doesn't matter. So, you're moving in that state of, I don't want to be in this situation, I don't like it, it's difficult, it's hard, blah, 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 blah. You called your girlfriends, he's no good, I got to get out, da, 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 da. You open the door for more things. And so oftentimes you will find that some people, when they stay in those states for a long time, at first it kind of shows up like you went out of the door and then you had a flat tire. And then the next day or the next month or so, then you got a ticket. That's what the older generation meant by Murphy's Law. Then you were going on and then you lost your job. But those states can get bigger and bigger and bigger. Those attractions can get larger, 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 and more devastating until they one day lead to things like illnesses and cancer and those kinds of things. And so, trust me on this, you don't want to do that. Look around the world at situations like this and see if you can pick up the pattern, because that's what swayed me. I wasn't a believer in all this kind of stuff at first, but when I was able to kind of look around and see the patterns and start to piece the puzzle together, even people that I knew, I'm like, you know what, she's always in a negative state and something bad is always happening to her. And that was even my story for a while until I kind of figured it out. You don't want to do that. And so what I've kind of learned to do is shift very quickly. Sometimes I don't get it right away, but I do get it. And in the past, I just sat in the midst of those states for days, for weeks, for months. And I didn't have to do that. It was as simple as knowing, first of all, that I have a choice. That I have a choice not to stay in the midst of that level of suffering. What also helped me was shifting my mindset to know that life is not really about my comfort, that life is about my growth, and that life is going to happen. And to the extent that I attach myself to the negative states, to the extent that I allow life happening to create negative states within me, then I set myself up to attract more negative states. And I don't have to do that. So now I shift. I have that understanding. I'm a human being. I may get caught up in it for a minute, but at some point I'm going to step back and say, hey, you don't have to do this. You can shift off of this. You can change your mindset about it. You can find the good in it. Gratitude is a very, very powerful shifter. You can call a friend that makes you laugh. You can find a comedian on TV and laugh really hard about that. You can go for a walk. You can do so many other things besides sitting in the midst of this situation and suffering. Oftentimes, we're creating it. That was the hard lesson, that all the negative things that were going on in my experience, I was kind of responsible for a lot of it. Now, life is going to happen. People are always going to lose loved ones. We live in a finite environment as human beings. It's a journey. And to the extent that you can raise your high vibration, or raise your vibration high. I think of like your Betty Whites of the world. She made it to like 99. She was always laughing. She was always light in spirit. We can affect the journey, but we're not going to stop in the inevitable. People are going to leave this planet. And I think for me, that tends to be the biggest one that causes suffering for human beings, is when they lose loved ones. But just being able to shift and being able to say, you know what? This is what life is. It's finite. Those souls come here. They do a journey and they partner with us, and we share and we love and we interact and we have a lot of fun. But eventually, all of us are going to one day leave this planet. And just being able to hold that different perspective is all you need to end suffering. You're always going to grieve. I was thinking of a loved one that I lost over the summer today. You're always going to kind of feel that. But the states of suffering that I see some people doing when their loved ones transition, we don't have to do that. And it doesn't make you a bad person because you're not sobbing and crying and lamenting over your loved one. It just means that you hold the consciousness that they've transcended back to all that is. And eventually we'll all be back there. And that's just a conversation that we simply aren't having. So that creates a lot of suffering for people. Things like divorces. My perspective is this: you love a person, but you understand that they always have the potential to change their mind, and that your journey is long, and that people are going to come in and out of your experience along the entire journey. And yes, that could even be a spouse. And so sometimes just shifting our perspective can kind of tamp down a lot of those states of suffering. And again, if you tamp down the states of suffering, then you kind of mitigate the negative vibrations that you're sending out, and then you stop attracting more. And as your vibration raises, you are now on the path to peace, joy, love, success, attracting the right partner even after divorce, if you don't sit and lament and complain and cry and do all those things that we have been taught is very normal and human to do. And they are, but they are not serving us. And so you want to try to shift as much as you can, and do it at your own pace and at your own level. You may not be a person that can look at divorce and say, I'm going to transcend that, and he went on his place, he found himself, and I'm going to be good with that. You may not be able to get there, and that's okay. But what you can do is call a friend and go have a drink. Get your mind off of it. What you can do is put on a movie and curl up and pet your kitty cat. You have to kind of find your own way of doing it. Whatever raises your vibration is valid. And lastly, I'm going to say about suffering. You want to do as little of it as you can. And you do that by shifting your perspective. And you do that by monitoring your vibration and understanding when it's dropped and raising it as soon as you can. But here's what you want to do in a state of suffering. If you found yourself there as a human being, like I said, extend yourself grace and amnesty if you find yourself there. But here's the thing that you want to walk away with from that particular life event. You want to walk away with the desire for an improved condition. And I think that is something that is oftentimes missed when we are faced with situations where we are suffering oftentimes. You want to walk away having shifted, having grown, having created the desire for an improved condition. We'll go back to my example of a divorce. When you go through all of that pain and that hurt and all of that, and you're working to shift your consciousness, and you're managing that process. But when you walk away, you want to walk away with the desire for an improved condition, for a great relationship, for a great marriage. You want to take everything that you didn't have that you learn from that experience, and you want to grow. And as you incorporate that lesson on your journey, on your path, when it's time to make that choice again, you're going to make a better choice. You're going to, after having gone through all of that level of suffering should launch in you the desire for an improved condition, and you should get to a place where you're not willing to settle for anything less than that. Same thing with a job that you don't like. When you're going there and you're hating it every day, you want to allow that to birth in you the desire for an improved condition. And so you're going to look for a better job. You're not going to go from a job where you hated your supervisor, where your supervisor was a lunatic, and then go over here and in the interview walk away and say she was a lunatic, but I'm going to take the job because it pays a lot of money. You don't want to do that. You want to make sure that you're growing and that you are moving towards the improved condition when you leave that particular situation. That's what this whole thing is about. We're growing. Growth is the MO on the human journey. And so, yeah, don't suffer just for suffering. Don't suffer just for sadness. Let it birth in you the desire for the improved condition. You know, if you get diagnosed with diabetes, don't wallow in that. Let it birth in you the desire for complete health. Go to the gym, drink the water, eat the vegetables, get the fly body. Let it birth in you the desire for something good. That is one of the advantages of suffering.